Hello and welcome to CIO Talk Radio. To learn more about the show, please visit www.ciotalkradio.com. As always, we invite you to join the discussion on Twitter, hashtag CTR Live, and look for this show as hashtag CIO and hashtag integration. Today's topic is Chief Integration Officer, the new CIO, and our guests for today's show are Hugh Miller, who's the CIO with City of San Antonio, Texas. How are you, Hugh? How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Great, great. And we also have Jay Ferro, who's the CIO with American Cancer Society. How are you doing, Jay?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, listeners, this is what we are trying to do here. So, while we understand that IT should support and be next to where a business user is and should be there to support and help that business user as they're touching a customer and creating value, can we realistically accomplish it without decoupling IT and embedding them in a business unit? If we do it, is that going to cause a problem? And is it going to be even possible if we wanted to do it if CIO was just remaining the traditional CIO, or we'll have to change the role and corresponding organization as Chief Integration Officer? And if we do this, what are the flaws in this approach? Is there a problem with the hypothesis itself? And if we do agree that we should change the CIO's role from Chief Information Officer to Chief Integration Officer, what are the challenges in that whole journey? That said, I'll start with you, Jay. Could you define an integrated business that the business says we want in today's context while you're wearing your CIO hat?
Yeah, absolutely. The short answer to your question is I think CIOs have to be the chief integration officer. I think the forces that we're dealing with today as organizations, whether it's cloud, mobile, BYOD, all of these other things necessitate that we are chief integration officers. I think the days of a CIO throwing up walls around a disconnected IT organization are long gone, except in the most extreme circumstances. And I think organizations, whether it's cloud technology, whether it's dispersed workforce, whether it's multiple business units, this move away from centralization and a more integrated, interconnected organization is absolutely mandatory for success. And CIOs who embrace that, I think, have a much greater chance of being successful.
So, Hugh, when you look at your organization, I'm sure government works in a certain fashion and they expect some rules, some governance models which are coming from the top. Do you think you can fundamentally decouple IT from being one organization where every IT related stuff comes from to put them and embed them in those different departments or agencies which are going out and serving the citizens?
Yeah, I mean, we have to be able to do that. And you look at the role of the CIO as we progress and as the role matures into modern business. Our role is to build that partnership with the business units throughout the organization and basically understand their model of business as well as we can to then be able to take our technology experience and leadership and integrate that in, give them the ability to deliver their services as effective as possible. So we have an oversight that we need to have because we spent, our careers understanding and learning and dealing with technology, but then we have to then spend that volume of time understanding the business areas to be able to deliver that service to them. And it has to be integrated.
So both of you, and I'll come back to you, Jay. So both of you agree that this should happen. Now, to the outside world, it still looks like the same old. What is changing behind the scenes, which is allowing you to show that you are decoupling if, in a way and creating value where it needs to be, but then you've not fundamentally disrupted your core working of how IT departments used to work even a decade ago?
Well, I think, yeah, it's an interesting point. And I think the onus is on the CIO to change the way that IT organizations work and are organized. I mean, no group and no person, no group, no organization is standalone anymore. And I think when you look at things through an IT lens, that's where you get in trouble. I mean, CIOs or anybody really has to look at things through an organizational or enterprise or business lens. And when you do that, you begin to look at things different. It begins to impact or influence the partnerships that you create in the organization. And you've heard me say this before. I mean, CIOs have the best seat in the house. I think CIOs who understand that and understand that they have the best view of how a business runs, from customer attraction to product creation to support after the fact, we have the best seat in the house. And so I think we're well positioned to be the chief integration officer.
So Hugh, imagine you're one of the agency which is trying to say Waterworks, right? And they are trying to do something as a business to make sure that that particular agency does the best job it can. And it needs some support from IT, whether it's applications or infrastructure or some sort of service desk related issue. They want a person next to them versus having to call a number and which will put you in the queue. So the time to value should be reduced for that business user who is trying to serve the citizen. But if we have that centralized help desk and a centralized development team and a centralized infrastructure team, then it goes back again to that centralized model. So, what is the realism in this whole approach that I'm promoting here, which is to literally decouple your IT department, put them in like bits and pieces in different agencies, and you manage as a triage and or a program manager?
Yeah, and essentially that's how we're built. And but as you look at the complex solutions that most organizations are trying to deploy, ideally you want the partnership at the level to where they're engaging your expertise early on. So IT for us is engaged early on in any type of major system deployment or change, and we take a leadership role along with the business unit to help build whatever it is that they're trying to solve. And we're there with them kind of in a partnership. And so every project that we have has a very strong business approach to what we're building or what we're deploying, and a technology approach. And as we go through that, we define how we support at the end of the effort. And so if there are components of it that require just a baseline technical support, there is a technical line that they call. But if it's a business system issue, we typically have people assigned to the department that are there with them all the time. So I think as this begins to grow and build, you end up having like I have people that are assigned to departments scattered throughout all of the organization. And the oversight that we give them is ensuring that they stay abreast of modern technology, the various different things from that oversight. When the business takes an oversight role on how they deliver technology solutions to their areas of the business. For us, it's a very hybrid built role that blends the two together.
Jay, if you were to ask the business and they say, this is what I want to achieve, and to what degree have they expressed this desire to have an IT person next to them and the person and or a team is there to support instantly versus having to reach out to someone?
Yeah, we went through that exact same culture shift. When I joined ACS 3 years ago, we had 13 different IT departments and many divisions all across the country, hundreds of locations. And I think people were very used to reaching over to, quote, the IT guy next to them to get some things done. And having those conversations was actually very difficult at the beginning. But we explained it through the lens of the greater good of the organization, that having a more unified and integrated support structure was better for the American Cancer Society, both from a cost effectiveness, but ultimately for an efficiency perspective. Part of this was a sell job on my part, just asking them to trust me and that, look, let's try this. If it doesn't work, we'll tweak it. And then we'll go back to square one if it becomes an untenable circumstance. And while there are still pockets of people who would love to have, quote, an IT guy next to them at all times, I think people inherently understand, even across the country, that's just not the way that we can operate. It's not a great use of our donor dollars. So having a centralized support and strategy function, and when I say centralized, I surely do not mean just geographic. I mean unified and integrated. It is a better use of a better use of our resources. We get more efficiencies. We don't repeat the same problems over and over. People are talking to one another. We actually, our support and our customer service metrics have gone up since then. Our customer satisfaction both from just a kind of a help desk or service desk perspective, but even from a partnership perspective, has gone up from the upper 70s, low 80s to the high 90s consistently over the last couple of years. So it does work. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of trust, but it does work.
So based on how you explained, and I'm sitting here thinking, if you moved the person away from where the business user needed them, and you move them into, and you use the word centralized, but perhaps not in the same manner as somebody would think, bring all of them at one place, you saved dollars, I'm sure, and it was efficient. What happened to the way a person was creating value? So did you move into a true all people sitting in one room and that person has to reach out and call a number versus reaching out to an individual, or the person was there, you just made the experience more unified?
We did both. We did both. It depends on the size of the location. It's a great question. Some of our larger divisional offices still have some local IT presence just based on the sheer number of people that they have there, and it makes sense to have that. But for application support, for higher level functions other than your typical PC level or Mac level support, it is centralized. And again, in quotes, we've implemented more of a chat function with our unified service desk. We've implemented more self-service. So it wasn't just taking something away and saying, hey, this is the new way we're doing it, just deal with it. It was, this is why this is better. And these are why these tools that we're now giving you are better for the organization. So I think it's important for CIOs not just to change it as if it were on a whim or, hey, I read it in some book or heard that this was better, or I heard some guy talk about it, but rather describe it in terms of value for the organization. And overall, it's worked. We've had missteps, but overall, it's worked. So in some organizations or in some divisional locations, we still have some kind of on-prem support, but our smaller location, we just couldn't justify having an on-site IT person. So that forced us to reconfigure and re-engineer the ways that we were providing PC support, the software that we use to deploy across the nation, the way that we secure our PCs or our assets all across, the way that we loop people in when it comes to more sophisticated projects. It's not, obviously, it's way more than just support. But rolling out better collaboration tools, SharePoint 2013 and many other collaboration tools have allowed us to work more in a more integrated fashion.
Now, then let's take a quick break. Listeners, we'll be right back. And this is a question going to be for you, Hugh. When we look at integration opportunities, how do you even identify those? Because, of course, the obvious ones are you're going to go and make the IT person embedded in the business, and then you have to integrate. Where else do you think integration opportunities exist, which is still work in progress in an organization such as yours? And in case you're supposed to be building a business case, what are the type of redundancies or conflicts or compromises that are currently happening because of lack of such an integration? Let's explore that, listeners. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned.
HP is proud to sponsor this program. Find out how the HP as a service solution for SAP HANA can help you gain instant, impactful business results without capital investment by logging on to hp.com. Transform information into intelligence and a competitive advantage with a full spectrum of SAP HANA products and services from HP, a global SAP hosting partner.
Bosch Software Innovations is proud to sponsor this program. Visit www.bosch-si.com/connected manufacturing to find out how Bosch can help you improve your operational performance and become a manufacturing industry leader in a connected world. Change the way you predict, manage, and produce outcomes. Bosch Connected Manufacturing.
HP is proud to sponsor this program. Tap into our expertise, innovation, and services to bring your most important workloads to the cloud. You are listening to CIO Talk Radio with Sanjog Aul. To learn more about the show, please visit www.ciotalkradio.com. If you have a question or comment, call toll-free at 1-866-472-5790. That number again is 1-866-472-5790. Now, back to the show. Here's Sanjog Aul.
Welcome back. So here you must be doing already some sort of an integration, or you actually already shared that with us. What is remaining? What are not so obvious areas which should still be taken in that spirit, and we should be still doing more integration? And since you are not ready yet with those types of integration, what kind of redundancies, conflicts, or compromises, or lost revenue or leakage may be causing because of that?
Well, for the most part, we are integrated, and one of the areas we're focusing on, looking for areas needing like system. For example, we have several departments that have been looking for a permitting system, and they started looking individually out for solutions on their own. And the benefit of working throughout all the organizations is now we blend all those together and come up with concepts that we say, well, if we have one system, can it support all of these needs? And we've been very successful at this, from case management to our permitting to various other things. And we have a large ERP system of which the bulk of the things that we deploy, the systems that we deploy, integrate into our ERP system from several different avenues, whether it's our vendor master or customer master, our personnel master, and all those things integrate together through the systems that we deploy. So it's been very successful. We're a very similar model to what you described earlier. And as that matures, we're seeing more and more savings that come out of it. And when we first deployed it, we had almost $1 million a year of savings in personnel.
So in an ideal case, Jay, don't you think CIO should be a king without a kingdom truly, where the rest of the people are distributed and doing things what they're supposed to do, and you are essentially managing? That was the premise of this whole conversation. Do you think that's the direction, that's the holy grail, or would you say that's something which is frowned upon within the IT department, and also business doesn't really see a value in it?
Well, for us, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be sort of a king concept, but more of a large level of a servant. I mean, we basically have to serve the needs of all of the different departments and coming up with a solution on how that works. And it's like Jay mentioned earlier, there's a large level of trust of which you have to sell, because for this to work at all, it has to be on both sides of the leadership of the organization, not only IT, but the leaders, excuse me, that are in the other departments. And their collaboration with us has to be there for this to work.
Jay, what is your vision and or benchmark that you've set for yourself for, say, American Cancer Society as the business, which you would like to see integrated, where all the different business functions are integrated and your technology department is becoming the conduit, the framework, the fabric?
That's a terrific question. And, what I'm seeing, well, there are many benchmarks. Some of them are technical, but at a higher, more strategic level, we're seeing IT included. And I don't want to use we hear this term seat at the table, and CIOs clamor for it for years and years. And we can have a whole nother radio show just about that. But he is now being included, and in many cases is leading transformational initiatives for the American Cancer Society. And I certainly just don't mean the plumbing of IT. I mean with things that are, whether it's fundraising systems, process improvements, systems that impact our research. But beyond just the technology, I think we've earned some respect on the fact that we understand what we are doing as an organization, how our business operates, which is very much like a for-profit in the sense that we have inputs and outputs and everything. Obviously, our mission is very different. But to me, that's a terrific benchmark when we are sought after as an organization, as subject matter experts, and more importantly, as leaders who understand the mission of the American Cancer Society as well or better than many other leaders in the organization. That to me is a vote of confidence and something we take seriously. So that's my most important benchmark. When they stop talking to us and they stop reaching out to us, I know we've done something wrong. That's not to imply that we're not very proactive. We are extremely proactive, but it's been a very good transition.
So the measure you used, like the vote of confidence as a measure, it's still a subjective measure. When you talk about integration in a technology project or integration of a business, should we be looking at subjective measures for us to pursue, or they should be more quantifiable?
Well, I think it's both. I think it's both. I think you can't have one without the other. I mean, if I were just doing it as hey, there's confidence in Jay Ferro. Well, that confidence is based on the fact that we've simplified and integrated a lot of the pain points that we had when we were 13 disparate organizations. And we could look at it from a number of systems perspective, a number of touch points, a number of data silos, the way that there are tons of different metrics, but it's our successful execution, communication, partnership, et cetera, that fueled the confidence that they have. Had we left everything on its own island, in its own silo, in its own kind of broken legacy state, they would not have had the vote of confidence. I mean, so I think they go hand in hand.
So Hugh, when you look at all the different organizations, I'm sure you are farther ahead in this whole journey. Many organizations, they say we have this cloud and we've got BYOD and other type of things that are getting introduced, but they still want business to always come back and tell IT that, okay, I'm not going to use cloud without your permission and or without consulting you in terms of what that will bring, because we call it rogue IT, which is a derogatory term of business trying to get some value where it can get. So if you are decoupled and integrated, then they should never have that problem, or we should never frown on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. A lot of what happens in our organization is they reach out and there are definitely offerings coming left and right to them. Because ultimately, some of them are even to circumvent IT because they feel like they can make money if they go directly to the department. But the departments have a desire to make sure that IT can support what it is that they are deploying. And so we typically approach these things as a collaborative effort. And ultimately they know that the support's going to have to come. And as companies mature, these things are actually beneficial as you develop these relationships. And very similar to what Jay is talking about, where we work together with them. We ultimately come up with a support solution for it. And when I approached the departments with this concept a few years ago, one of the things that was able to be pulled out was the departments. Let's say I'm talking to solid waste or I'm talking to the library. The volume of time they spend in their career was not focused on how to manage enterprise technology and IT problems. And so they want to hand that off to us, but in a way to where we act as a partner to them, there to help them, not to get in the way or tell them no. And so that partnership has to grow as you progress through these. And that truck where the departments basically understand that they don't understand the levels of things that we do in the technology arena. And that trust is what's built by our knowledge and understanding of these different things. And we're sitting in the perfect position to touch all departments, help throughout the whole organization to help it grow and become better. And ultimately, we're able to gauge these things by the level of service that the departments are able to give to the citizens and how we hear back from them on how well those services are being delivered.
Jay, when we look at IT people, the labeling is no people versus yes people. And that is pervasive, exceptions like yourself and Hugh's organization, I'm sure. Where is the problem? Where did they not integrate properly? Because if somebody wanted to use a cloud-based service and the fact that they did not come and consult you, that means you came across as no people.
I totally agree. I think you're always going to get someone who is maybe new to the organization, doesn't understand. Perhaps they had an individual bad experience with the organization. Maybe they just underestimate the complexity, which I think more often than not is what happens, because on an island, it may seem simple, but then when they want to obviously integrate with other systems, then it gets much more complex. And it goes back to something Hugh said in the trust that we've created, where the walls around IT, the communication vehicles that you've put in place, the open dialogue, the fact that IT people, and at least in my organization, are extremely visible, that we're very transparent with what's going on in our projects, so what's working, more importantly, what's not working and how we're going to fix it. All of these things breed trust. And I think people feel more comfortable saying, hey, look, this is the business problem we're trying to solve. And it's taken time. I mean, educating an organization to focus on what they're trying to do versus how they're trying to do it has been a very important step for us. And so we don't really necessarily come off as no. We may end up saying no, but I hear you're trying to accomplish this. And we actually have something that might solve the need. Can we unpack those business requirements a little bit and talk through what we have? And truly, if there is a net new business need, then we're all ears and we want to sit down and talk about how we get that accomplished. But it's never really no. It should be, I think, for most good CIOs, and I'm sure Hugh would agree, it's no, but, or yes, and, or sure, yeah, we absolutely can do that. Let's sit down and talk about it. It should never be no, period, end of story.
Hugh, is that too much to ask if a business says, I want self-service computing, I want autonomous computing, where I would go pick up the vendor and somewhere a process is created where IT gets involved, but it doesn't have to kind of reach out to say, what the heck are you doing, Mr. Business? This is not the way you're supposed to do it.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, we have some components like that but again, it's typically done in collaboration to where, depending on the type of need and the type of solution that they're wanting to deploy, we can deploy those type of solutions that are out there, whether it's a software as a service or a cloud service or whatever. But it's typically, I mean, obviously you are going to have areas that they want something, someone's coming in new and they say, oh, well, I just want this, I'm going to go out and buy it. But there are ramifications to plugging in the wrong type of technology into a large enterprise organization. And I think that discussion is something that we're always open to have with the leadership. And so it's obviously, I mean, one reality here is IT as a department component of business is in a lot of ways very infantile, right? It's only been around in mainstream since the 90s. And so there's a lot of understanding and growing of what IT is becoming to the business. And as we mature into that, there are a lot of changes that we've been making and that we will make. And as you look forward, the core piece that the role that we're going to play is that leader and integrator and innovator throughout the organization. Like Jay mentioned earlier, we touch all areas of the organization. For it to grow, there's going to be some level of technology that's infused in that. It gives us a great opportunity to be that change leader for the organization. And ultimately, we will play a role more deeply in the business than we ever have before. And most of the people I'm hiring now are more business-minded technologists than just straight up core technology-driven people. And I think that's going to be more and more of what we see as we look in the future.
Let's take a quick break, listeners. We'll be right back. And Jay, would love to explore whether this whole integration thing that we're talking about, is that an art form or a science? If it is a science, it has to have a method to the madness. And most engineers do not claim to be artists. So if at all it's an art form, then God bless us all. Where is this going to go if we have so many organizations who do not have artists like Jay and Hugh to be able to take it to a point where the business has confidence in them and they are able to put people and resources right where the value is getting created, and you will become the chief integration officer? How do you go about this journey if you're starting out? Please stay tuned, listeners. We'll be right back and explore.
HP is proud to sponsor this program. Tap into our expertise, innovation, and services to bring your most important workloads to the cloud.
Bosch Software Innovations is proud to sponsor this program. Visit www.bosch-si.com/connected manufacturing to find out how Bosch can help you improve your operational performance and become a manufacturing industry leader in a connected world. Change the way you predict, manage, and produce outcomes. Bosch Connected Manufacturing.
HP is proud to sponsor this program. Find out how the HP as a service solution for SAP HANA can help you gain instant, impactful business results without capital investment by logging on to hp.com. Transform information into intelligence and a competitive advantage with a full spectrum of SAP HANA products and services from HP, a global SAP hosting partner. You are listening to CIO Talk Radio with Sanjog Aul. To learn more about the show, please visit www.ciotalkradio.com. If you have a question or comment, call toll-free at 1-866-472-5790. That number again is 1-866-472-5790. Now, back to the show. Here's Sanjog Aul.
Welcome back. So, Jay, all the responses and the questions we asked, the responses were more where it looked like an art form where you are able to build great relationships and you're able to set and manage expectations, etc. More like an artist. But then most engineers and many times the technology leaders or even CIOs have an engineering DNA, if you will, or a scientist DNA. So is this whole integration, decoupling and making this from a centralized to an integrated organization where IT is embedded into business, if it is a science, what's the playbook looking like?
No, it's a terrific point. And I think you're spot on, but I think that's why you're seeing more and more CIOs coming out of the business ranks. And I know Hugh would agree that the nature of the IT resources that we're hiring today. Now, there are exceptions. There are pure play coders or super technical folks that you absolutely need to be head down and get some of the very sophisticated work done. But the nature of the IT resource I hired today versus what I would have hired 10, 15 years ago is quite different. So when it comes to integration at any level of a large organization like Hugh's or mine or any other one, the main issue is not technology. I mean, there are huge technology components to it. Obviously, it's very complicated. It's very hard. We tend to make it more complicated because the main issue is people. You're trying to get personalities along the same path. You're trying to build confidence. You're trying to build trust. You're trying to demystify IT in a way. And Hugh touched on it earlier, but it is not on them to understand us. It is on us as leaders to understand them. And you're right, Sanjog. It ends up being a little bit of an art form, but what you end up looking for out of the CIO or any IT leader are more enhanced people skills. You're bringing people in who are more adaptable, who can have those conversations, who can walk in both worlds, who understand business process. I tell my folks all the time, I would much rather have an 80% technical person with 100% people skills versus the opposite, where I have hardcore technical skills, but they absolutely cannot deal with people or communicate their thoughts in a coherent and collaborative way. So I think the nature of the professional is changing. And because of that means you focus more on leadership skills. And there are obviously programs for that. There are programs around communication. I think colleges now, universities are focusing much more on the leadership aspect of executives, whether they're MIS programs or whatever. And I think that's very important.
So, Hugh, if a CIO who may be listening to this or maybe having similar thoughts is not equipped, doesn't simply have the DNA of being an artist, where is the help available? Should they hire someone as a chief integration officer who should report to this individual so that they can continue managing information while getting integration become a reality in the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think how they assess that, because every organization is going to have its own DNA, and how you navigate through that there's going to be different. And the person who is hired to actually lead all that, hopefully the leadership of the organization understands that. And when they hire somebody, they have the picture of how they want it to be, that they can help that person become. And if there are deficiencies then yes, you need to realize that and figure out how do you infuse that into your organization with some type of hire, or if it's a consultancy because it's not a long-term hold that you have. But it did dissecting that. I mean, because as you look at large organizations, these roles are impossible for someone to fill the core of the role day to day. I mean, there's too many of them. And so you have to have that sort of leadership oversight, and it's really kind of a hybrid. I mean, you have sort of, like you elegantly said, this artistic skill, and you have sort of this scientific skill, because what we are doing does have a lot of complexity from how it goes together and functions at the level that it needs to, with a level of dynamic changeability, because technology was changing at a rapid pace, and you have to figure out how do you adjust to that in your organization. So yeah, I mean, it's a complex realm of how you do it, but yet if you dig in and understand all the different pieces of your organization, you can see where you need to hire or fill in gaps that you may not currently have.
I agree with you. I think the expectation of the role of the CIO, I mean, we expect our CMOs, our CFOs, our COOs, and our CEOs to be good leaders. I don't think it's any different for the CIO. I mean, I know in the past it was very different because we were on an island and we spoke a language that nobody else understood. That has changed today. And I think that the same burden of leadership, or the same challenge, not really burden, but the same challenge, is on our shoulders, and we have to embrace it.
So, if you had to create a boot camp, Jay, on converting the regular traditional CIO into a chief integration officer, what would your course curriculum look like?
Oh man, you don't want me in charge of a boot camp, Sanjog.
I do it.
I mean, 24/7, baby. We'd be running something pretty tough. No, I mean, certainly if it was focusing on the role as a chief integration officer and as a leader, we'd focus far more on communication skills, on collaboration, on the role of a leader, on the notion of servant leadership and why we exist, getting CIOs comfortable with the softer side of the role. I think most CIOs come to the table with a fair amount of technical knowledge. I think today's CIO, where we are shortchanged, or where our shortcoming is that coming up through the ranks, we were never, in days past, we were not asked to be this leader of an integrated organization. So I would focus a lot on leadership, collaboration, process management, operations management. It would look very much like an MBA with a heavy leadership component to it.
Hugh, what would you change for an organization which wants to move from a centralized to an integrated organization in terms of the organizational design, the processes, the culture, and the people?
That's a lot. So first of all, you're going to have to begin to express the desired change to the other leaders throughout the organization. They have to ultimately believe in it to make it work. Because if it's something that they don't see the value in, and you're not able to express and get them to believe in the value in it, you will never be able to succeed. And so ideally, it's very similar to what Jay just mentioned at his boot camp tactic. You need to actually begin to focus on those different areas now as you're looking throughout the organization. And as you look through it, I mean, there's obviously ways to save money. And so every organization is looking for ways to make themselves more cost effective and nimble. But to do that is very complex. I mean, you have to get to the point to where your IT leadership understands the various areas business that are going on. Like in the city, we have 34 disparate departments, and most of those departments are running disparate businesses that don't rely on each other. And that complexity is hard for some people to understand. And so you have to get in there and be with the different departments at a fairly intimate level of their understanding their business. And if you're able to do that, ultimately those leaders are going to ask you in the same way that you're asking them to transition into more of an integrated support shared service. And so it's a progressive thing that ultimately has to have buy-in. If you don't, it will be very difficult to succeed.
What changes would you expect from the rest of the business environment, Jay, in order for you to be successful as a chief integration officer?
Well, I mean, I think the view of the CIO has to change, and I think we earn that. I think having speaking the right language and making sure that folks see us a whole lot more than maybe they've seen us in the past, we earn it. And it forces us to get out of our seats. It forces us to have those conversations. And I think it comes naturally when you've earned that confidence. Now, the one thing I'll add to this is I've seen people make the mistake of just wanting to become world-class leaders and do all these other external things, but they take their eye off the wheel and let the day-to-day operation come to a grinding halt. And we can't do that either. We have the quote unquote luxury of getting to do both. We have to keep the email running and everything else and all the lights on, but at the same time, the burden is on us. So what I would want to see what I saw out of my colleagues, and I'll give you a real life example here at ACS, is they didn't trust IT when I came. And I don't want to paint a picture where my predecessor or anything was doing wrong things. We were not, as an organization, set up to be a more integrated enterprise. And so I came in and there was a lot of outreach, a lot of very frank discussions. I had to take a lot of bullets and arrows about what was working in IT, what wasn't. And I think when you go with your arms open in a very transparent stance and you're willing to say, you know what? Yeah, things aren't working the way I want them to, but I'm seeking to understand what you're trying to accomplish. You're asking the right questions. You build that trust and confidence, and they begin to respect you more as a business leader, not the IT guy. And so it takes time. It's certainly not something you get day one.
Let's take a quick break, listeners. We'll be right back. And Hugh, I'll come to you. So we do want to make a difference as a leader. So that's why we say we'll transform IT from a centralized to an integrated department, if you will, where it's integrated with the business. What's in it for the IT people? They really personally do not like to sit next to a business user who cannot understand their lingo. Yes, they have to serve them. So what is it that you do as a Pied Piper to lead those people so that they follow you eventually for a business end goal or business benefit, but that is truly going against their core DNA? Please stay tuned, listeners. Right back. We'll be right back and explore.
Bosch Software Innovations is proud to sponsor this program. Visit www.bosch-si.com/connected manufacturing to find out how Bosch can help you improve your operational performance and become a manufacturing industry leader in a connected world. Change the way you predict, manage, and produce outcomes. Bosch Connected Manufacturing.
HP is proud to sponsor this program. Tap into our expertise, innovation, and services to bring your most important workloads to the cloud. HP is proud to sponsor this program. Find out how the HP as a service solution for SAP HANA can help you gain instant, impactful business results without capital investment by logging on to hp.com. Transform information into intelligence and a competitive advantage with a full spectrum of SAP HANA products and services from HP, a global SAP hosting partner. You are listening to CIO Talk Radio with Sanjog Aul. To learn more about the show, please visit www.ciotalkradio.com. If you have a question or comment, call toll-free at 1-866-472-5790. That number again is 1-866-472-5790. Now, back to the show. Here's Sanjog Aul.
Welcome back. So as an IT crew who otherwise feel comfortable among their fellow technology leaders and programmers and other type of technology people, you're trying to put them next to a business user who may not have very much in common. And as people, they want to hang out at a place where they're comfortable. You're getting them to go against your DNA, their DNA. How do you make that happen, Hugh?
Well, it's multifaceted. One of the things we've been working on is actually having them go through some level of training of understanding how to blend those relationships. To your point, a lot of people growing up in IT are just sheer technologists. And historically, they did not have the ability to communicate with others who are not technologists, and they speak in a language that's convoluted. And yet we've got to break that. I remember in school, in college, it was one of the things in my engineering school that they forced us is that we had to do projects and display our project in a way that someone who did not understand what we were doing had some level of understanding of what we were trying to show. And so there's a portion of it that's education and training. There's also a portion of it for us that's in a change on how we hire people. And so again, to me, I think that the technologists that we're looking at for the future have a hybrid version of that. They understand technology, but they also understand how to talk to people without trying to belittle them or go over their head. Because typically when someone raises their hand for support because of a technology issue, they come to a point that's challenging to them because they have to the point where their intellect or knowledge of technology has come to a wall. And that's a very vulnerable state that we feel, right? And when we reach out for someone to help us, how we respond to that is very important, whether someone's angry that they've reached that wall or whether they're very timid. We've got to deal with them in a way that where it's not their fault and we help them solve that problem. And training people to do that is very difficult. Hiring them is becoming, more of the standard. And at some point, there are changes that you have to make in your staff. There are some people, like Jay mentioned earlier, that are deep technologists doing very incredible things that you just don't have around people. There's someone who works as a liaison between them and the business. But the people who are required to face the customers and face the other employees, they end up having to have this skill set that is now maturing in technologists. And that's ultimately where we're going to have to get to. And if it ultimately requires us to make a change in the employee that we have, that they just don't fit, or we work with them to change their own abilities. And I think that's ultimately where we're headed.
So, Jay, don't you think this then becomes a 2030 project where all the current people who we cannot change as a DNA retire and then you hire people? Or is there some other hope?
Well, I agree 100% with Hugh that, for those certain types of roles, it requires a skill set that you didn't need 20 years ago. But that's no different than any other industry. Roles evolve, organizations evolve. There are still roles within IT that certainly you can be more of a heads down introverted type person and not have to deal with that. But that is changing. There are fewer and fewer of them. And I think what you're seeing is certain IT leaders that simply cannot make the change, retire, or find different roles within the organization. I tend to be optimistic and think that we can get most folks to the point where they maybe they don't enjoy it, but they're good enough at it to be effective. And I think when you sit down and have a conversation with folks about why they need to do it and why it's important and where IT as an industry is going and where the CIO is going, where the organization needs them, most come along. But there are some, and you make a terrific point, it's just not in their DNA. And if you don't have a spot for them in the organization, it's never easy. In fact, it's probably the hardest part of our jobs as leaders. But for the betterment of the organization, you have to move them out and move somebody in that is willing to do what you need.
So one is the skill you mentioned, Jay. Another is the intent. So person may have those skills, but the person simply doesn't feel that they should be uprooting themselves from where they were comfortable and go sit next to a business counterpart. So in that case, it is the duty of a leader, or that's where the leadership would come in perhaps. So what's the magic you're going to pull to have the change of heart?
Well, you certainly try your best to explain it. You try to lead by example. I think all leaders have to lead by example. You certainly wire it into performance appraisals and all of those other formal mechanisms that we have. But eventually, and we talked about it a little offline, is that you have to, if you can't change people, you have to change people. Business doesn't stop. Organizations don't stop. And the bus tends to leave the station one time. And you want to give them the tools to do it. You want to properly motivate them. You want to show them that it's imperative that if they want to be successful as an individual, and that if we want to be successful as an organization, that they need to do this. And if they don't come along, then you will find somebody who can.
So one final message from both of you. If you were to give 3 words, top things that come to your mind, which you would like to share, with the listeners as things which leadership should keep in mind so that they can transform themselves into chief integration officer and also have their team follow you? Hugh, starting with you.
Leadership, trust, and change management.
Okay. Jay.
Those are all very good ones. You took all my answers. No, I'm kidding.
Thanks for letting me go first.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Hugh. I appreciate that. Now I got to dig deep. No, trust, absolutely, but transparency, service, and listening.
Thank you so much, both of you, Jay and Hugh, for sharing your thoughts on how organizations and their leaders could transform from a centralized technology organization to an integrated one, and how a CIO, which is traditionally a chief information officer, could morph into becoming a chief integration officer. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sanjog.
Thank you. And listeners, hope you got some value out of this conversation. Please like us on Facebook, search for CIO Talk Radio, and be sure to follow us on Twitter. And please do not forget to sign up for our monthly newsletter. Thank you again for listening to CIO Talk Radio. This is Sanjog Aul, your talk show host. Till next week, take care and God bless.